Okay. Yes. Dear colleagues, dear participants, dear panelists, and also dear viewers, I would like to say welcome to you all for the International Congress of Emerging Trends in Tourism held by Necmettin Erbakan University and with the collaboration of Konya Central Municipality. Now everybody and we all know that changes that have taken place in many areas of the world in recent period with a positive and negative aspects lead and direct our lives, our lifestyles, our economy, our industry, and of course tourism. The pandemic COVID-19 is the last and biggest examples of these situations. So that's why we are all together in online sessions. So I would like to begin these sessions with our first presentation. That is Mr. Yusuf, Dr. Mr. Yusuf Günaydın's presentation. I think, prepared that presentation with Mr. Özgür Özer, I think. Yes, Mr. Yusuf. Mr. Yusuf, could you please start? Mr. Yusuf? I think, sorry friends, I think we have some problems of hearing. Do you hear me, friends?
We hear you. We hear you.
Thank you, but Mr. Günaydın, Yusuf Günaydın isn't there, I think. I can't see his name.
We are using the same link.
Instead of Mr. Yusuf Günaydın, we can begin with Assistant Professor Davut Uysal. Mr. Davut, are you there to start your session presentation? Mr. Davut? Mr. Davut, is it possible to see?
Look, there's internet problem.
You go online, do without, but he's not turned on this one and this one.
Mr. Davut?
We are not getting the presentation.
Yes, also I do not have the view of Mr. Davut. Sorry.
He seems to be online, but he has not turned the video on.
Yes, yes.
He has not turned the audio on.
Mr. Davut, could you please just turn on your video?
Video and also audio. We can't hear.
Mr. Davut, we can't see you.
We can't hear.
Yeah, we can't hear.
And also we can't hear you. Sorry.
It looks like he's on with the presentation, but we can't hear and we can't see him.
Yes, Mr. Yusuf Günaydın has joined in the session, but Mr. Davut, can you hear me?
Hocam merhaba, duyabiliyor musunuz beni?
Evet, sizi duyabiliyorum. Davut Bey, siz misiniz?
Yok hocam, ben Selman. Şimdi Yusuf
Evet.
hocamla Davut hocam büyük ihtimalle dinleyici linkinden bağlandılar.
Evet.
Onlara gönderilen mail adresinden gelen linke tıklamaları gerekiyor ama acaba mail mi gitmedi? Bunu bir öğrenebilirsek. Yusuf hocam, duyabiliyor musunuz beni? Ya da Davut hocam?
Mr. Davut, can you hear me? Can I learn where did you go in the system? Did you go in as a viewer or as a presenter? Can I learn that?
Yusuf hocam, size mail geldi mi?
Do you know?
Hocam bir saniye, mail gelmediyse ben size birazdan buradan bekleyin lütfen, ayrılmayın. Ben size bir link göndereceğim. Ya da şöyle yapalım. Şöyle davet etsem sizi. Yusuf hocam, şu anda ben size buradan bir link gönderdim. Lütfen ben çıkacağım buradan. Sizin linkinizden bağlandım. O linkten çıkıyorum. Siz bu benim göndermiş olduğum linkten bağlanın lütfen.
Hocam buradayım ben şu an.
Ben sizi davet ettim, geldiniz herhalde.
Evet, ben kendimi görmüyorum ama sizleri görüyorum.
Hocam sol üstte kamera seçeneği var, onu bir açarsanız. Tamam. Süper hocam. Tamam. Yusuf hocam, sizsiniz değil mi?
Evet, benim.
Tamam hocam.
Davut hocamı da göremiyoruz şu an.
Davut hocamı da, sayın hocam, benim çıkmam gerekiyor şu anda. Çünkü kontenjanı dolduruyoruz. Gerçi burada 4-5'miş. Evet, 5 kişilik kontenjan varmış. Hemen Davut hocayı da ben davet edeyim link paylaşmadan. Bir saniye. Davut hoca ayrılmış herhalde buradan. Hocam, Davut hoca geldiğinde biz iletişime geçmeye çalışalım. Aynur hocam.
Tamam.
Davut hoca eğer chatten yazarsa, normal izleyici linkin, yani izleyici olarak bağlanıp chatten yazarsa, o options olan, yani 3 nokta üst üste olan yerde şey yazıyor. Return as attended diye yazıyor. Orada katılımcı olarak davet edebilirsiniz. O şekilde katılım sağlamaya çalışalım en azından şimdilik.
Bir bakalım hocam.
Tamam. Siz isterseniz başlayın. Ben Davut Hoca ile iletişime geçmeye çalışayım.
Tamam. Tamam. Teşekkür ederim.
Rica ederim. İyi oturumlar.
Sağ olun. So we had some problems with the presentations and with the shortcut. Yes, Mr. Yusuf, we can start with your presentation. I think you did that presentation with Mr. Özgür Özer from
Yes.
our school, Necmettin Erbakan University. So let's start with your presentation. Here it is. Your turn.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Just a second. Slide. How can I find my files? Can you see the screen now?
Yeah, we see the screen. It gives sample 90 academics. It says, is that yours?
No, it's not mine. It's not mine.
So that is Mr. Davut's presentation, I think. İzmir Katip Çelebi University.
No.
Is that so?
No, it's not mine.
That's a very big problem again. I don't know how to solve that.
So I'm trying to add my file now here. Just a second. Maybe I can do like that.
Yes, please do that.
I sent the file. Now, can you see that now?
No. Slides, it's given. Davut Uysal, yes.
No, not Uysal. There's no another slide still there, not mine. I sent now on the system. I sent mine. Name is.
Let me just.
Reserve Hotel Marketing. Yeah.
Is that this?
Which one? I can't see now.
Let me.
Screen share on. Just a second.
Is that this, Mr. Davut? Do the views of Turkish and European tourism academics? Is that this?
It's not mine. It's me, Yusuf, Dr. Yusuf.
There isn't a slide of you right now.
Just a second. Now,
let me just look.
Yeah, the message says webinar jam is sharing my page now. You should see it now.
I can't see your presentation here. Sorry, but Mr. Günaydın.
Yes.
Where is it?
The message says it is on now. It should be on your screen now. I don't know.
Yusuf Günaydın. Let us just want a help from Mr. Selman.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem.
Selman Hoca sisteme şu an giriyor hocam. Kusura bakmayın bu problem
Tamam,
için.
sorun yok.
Hocamız hemen müdahale etsin.
Tamam.
Merhabalar hocam tekrardan.
Merhaba.
Hocam nasıl bir sorun yaşıyoruz şu anda?
Hocamın sunumunu alamıyoruz. Diğer hocanın sunumu görünüyordu sistemde hocam.
Hocam şehir yapılmazsa ekran yani screen şeyi olarak yapın. Yukarıda üstü 4 tane yuvarlağın en sağdan ikincisi. Bilgisayar ekranınızı paylaşın.
Hocam göremedim ben. Bende mi?
Yok siz değil hocam. Yusuf hocam sunacak herhalde değil mi şu anda?
Evet, şimdi ben sunacağım. Evet.
Yusuf hocam, yukarıdaki 4 tane buton var. O butondan sağdan ikinci olan ekran screen share yapabiliyorsunuz oradan. Yani bilgisayar ekranınızı oradan paylaşarak yapın olmazsa.
Ben şimdi dosyayı hem oraya attım, gönderdim, file share yaptım. Dosya orada olması lazım şu an. Bir de bende mesaj var ve webinar paylaşımı aktif diyor şu an. Bakın.
Hocam dediğim bir yaparsanız, screen share yapabilirsiniz.
Nereden yapacağım onu?
Sağ üstte 4 tane buton var. Onlardan en sağdan ikinci olan.
En sağdan 4 tane buton. Ekran işareti.
Evet, ekran işareti var orada. Evet, Turn Screen Share diyor. Ona tıklarsanız bilgisayar ekranınız paylaşılacak birazdan.
Tüm ekran, evet. Tüm ekrana tıkladım.
Davut hocam da geldi bu arada.
Join the room diyor benim için. Evet, paylaş.
Evet hocam, şu anda paylaştı. Kendiniz orada sunumunuzu açabilirsiniz.
Evet, kalemin yan tarafında. Yok, tüm ekran değil hocam, deyin, pencere deyin.
Şu an tamam mı acaba?
Tamam hocam, şu anda görüyoruz biz sizin sunumunuzu.
Tamam. Hocam başlayabilir miyim?
Evet. Yes, you may start.
Okay, thank you. This paper is about resort hotel marketing and the product process and relations with tour operators created by Dr. Yusuf and Assistant Professor Dr. Özgür. Abstract, it has been obvious that the coronavirus has had a major impact both nationally and internationally, regardless of the variety of economic sectors and the lifestyle of individuals. The tourism and hospitality industry have been one of these parties that had to be fully or partially suspended over the last 1.5 years. The intensive cooperative relationship between hotel businesses, particularly resort hotels due to their seasonality problem, and tour operators has also become effective, despite the fact that both parties have worked well to overcome the negative consequences of such an economic crisis. As a result, the purpose of this study is to examine the problems encountered in the marketing of resort hotel businesses and the management of reservations and the crisis in relation with tour operators during and after the COVID-19 era have been resolved. The authors interviewed the general managers or sales managers of the resort hotel businesses operating in Bodrum in 2020. This study in particular discusses the issue in relation to the reservation cancellations, refunds, changes of operations, rate pricing, review pricing, and customer management. This study provides also a real case study from the reality of the tourism and hospitality operations throughout the full year of 2020. COVID-19 virus, which started in China and spread all over the world, has shown its effect in Turkey since the beginning of March 2020, when caused the first deaths. In this case, the economic crisis has also led to the emergence of national and international travel while taking a long time to strap movement and their collapse. The purpose of this study is to examine the issue of resolving the problems encountered in the marketing of reserved businesses, and the management of reservations and the crisis in relation with tour operators during and after the COVID-19 era. Methodology: within the scope of the study, the general managers or sales managers of the resort hotel businesses operating in Bodrum were interviewed with interview technique, and their opinions about the management of the crisis were taken. In particular, reservation cancellations, returns, changes, repricing, re-advertising, and customer management issues are discussed. In addition to the experience and observations of the first order, as resort hotel manager throughout 2020, the information shared by other hotel businesses were also used. Since it was out of the scope of the study, individual customers were not included in the study. It is increasingly understood that reservations, which are the result of millions of euros of marketing activities, do not have any meaning anymore. All tourism stakeholders are in trouble. In resort hotel businesses, on the other hand, each unit has a problem for itself, but it has been understood that the most important problem will be the marketing management. Non-marketing methods will not fully work in this process, but it has been necessary to develop a target-oriented strategic marketing approach. Marketing and management of resort hotels. Management in resort hotel businesses consists of accounting, food and beverage, technical service, room division, and marketing departments. As in any businesses, the revenue-generating unit is marketing and is also critical in resort hotel management. What's marketing? This definition was updated by AMA 2011 as an activity carried out by organizations and individuals consisting of a series of institutions and processes for the development, communication, delivery, and exchange of proposals that represent a value for customers, buyers, stakeholders, and society as a whole. What is tourism marketing? Tourism marketing, according to the definition made by Grönwald and others, making promises about the necessary products and services while traveling and staying in place outside of the ordinary environment of the person for entertainment, business, and other purposes for less than 1 year, ensuring the fulfillment of the individual expectations created by such promises and creating value for customers. We can examine the room sales practices of which the marketing department is responsible in resort hotel businesses under two main headings. Direct selling. Resort hotel establishments can sell the room types that are left over from the allotment sales or are reckoned through direct sales channels. Depending on the equipment occupancy of the product types, the sales price may be above or below the average. Indirect sales. Most of the room sales are made by contracted operators. Is indirect sales, especially in resort hotels. This system has been valid for many years and is based on mutual benefit of the hotel and the operator. From the operator's point of view, a serious budget is spent on marketing and sales efforts that started a year ago. COVID and aftermath. This study includes 15 operators bringing customers from the 5 major countries. These are Turkey, Poland, Ukraine, Russia, and Britain. During COVID-19, hoteliers had many meetings under hotelier associations. These are BODER, Bodrum Hotelier Associations, BOTRO, Bodrum Chamber of Commerce, BOTAV, Bodrum Promotion Foundation members, which are the professional organizations of the hotel company managers trying to serve under these conditions. Long discussions were held on how to manage this process. Hoteliers underlined once again that their relations with tour operators are very important for the industry. Relation with operators. Resort hotel contracts are generally made and signed in May-July period for the following year. Contracts include details of service as well as details such as price, dates, discounts, and prepayment. Marketing activities are initiated by the operators after the agreement and sales for the following year begin to come. The management process of reservations is covered under 5 headings. Changes, cancellations, and refunds. Package tour reservations, date changes, cancellations, or refunds of reservations made by operators according to the terms of the contract were required. New sales policies, advertising, and repricing. Starting from June 2020, after about 3 months of recession, businesses redetermined their advertising and sales strategies according to market conditions. Advertising strategy. Regular season appropriate advertising strategies to the new conditions of businesses as distinct from the Minister of Tourism slogan for its work turned into a safe tourism. Repricing. During the COVID process, it would be appropriate to divide the sales strategies of resort hotel businesses in two parts. First, hotel businesses reduce their prices by approximately 30–50%, with the expectation that countries will allow retravel since June 2020. Second, day changes that may occur in a normal period are reconstructed with new prices, but now day changes without any cost. Customer management. With the opening of resort hotel businesses in July 2020, they started to serve in accordance with COVID conditions and safe tourism certificate regulations. Conclusion. The most successful outcome of this period was that the hotels and operators resolved this crisis period, which affected the tourism industry globally, with mutual understanding, which was stressful at first due to years of cooperating, although it was not fully understood. The Ministry of Culture and Tourism developed safe tourism practice and has been successfully managing COVID-19. While many countries do not know what to do yet, Turkey has taken action on this issue. The cancellation, change, or refunds of tens of thousands of bookings, especially during the COVID period, left the resort hotel, sales agencies, and operators in a very difficult situation in terms of finance, especially the administration. Despite all these difficulties, it's very important for the operators to act very quickly after the decision to start tourism. This sector has completed 2020, and although they are indecisive, many businesses are pleased that they have opened their hotels. Generally, hygiene and service training has become even more important in the new era. It is now known that it is not possible to go back to previous years, and hotel management should be done more carefully between the operated hotel and the customer. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Yusuf Günaydın. Now we have our second participant, whose name is Mr. Davut Uysal. Yes, Mr. Davut Uysal, I would like to say welcome to you. Yes, it's your turn, Mr. Davut. Yes, Mr. Davut.
Okay, thank you. Let me introduce, can everybody see my presentation on the screen?
Unfortunately not, we can't.
Any problem?
Unfortunately
you can see,
not,
okay?
we can't see your presentation, yeah. Mr. Davut.
Yeah, okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hocam, can you hear me? I'm speaking, yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but what about the others?
Can everybody hear me?
Me too, yes, I can.
Hocam?
I can hear Dr. Davut Uysal, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I hear you, Mr. Davut.
Shall I continue presenting?
We can hear you.
But upload your slide.
Oh, let me. But you can't see my presentation, right?
We can't
see. There isn't any presentation here.
Can you see now?
No, it isn't.
You should share your screen.
See the presentation.
Okay. And I will start presenting that. Okay, thank you. Now, let me introduce myself first. I am Dr. Uluslararası from Üniversitesi, Department. Yeah, okay. The Department of Tourism Department. The title of my presentation is "The views of Turkish and European tourism academics differ regarding the emerging tourism trends." Okay, this is the title of...
Hocam sunumunuz maalesef ekranda yok.
Geri geldi.
Okay.
Ses. Davut Hocam duyabiliyor musunuz?
Okay. Let me give a few seconds. I'm thinking my... Duyabiliyorum, evet, ama ben ekranımı paylaşıyorum buradan. Ama arkadaşlar...
Şu an görünüyor.
Evet, şu anda.
Hocam görebiliyoruz şu anda ekranınızı.
Şu anda görüyoruz hocam.
Ses kaliteniz de düzeldi. Biraz önce sesiniz de kesik kesik geliyordu.
Görebiliyor musunuz?
Evet, görebiliyoruz artık.
Evet.
Tamam o zaman. Başlayabilirim değil mi?
Evet, evet hocam lütfen.
Okay. Tamam. Bile artık hani birim. Okay. Myself. I'm Dr. Davut Uysal from and do the views Turkish and European tourism events. So the COVID-19 virus either in Wuhan, China, spread the whole world and turned out, and this pandemic has led to a global crisis, and the tourism has been one of the most affected sectors when it comes to the revenue the employment that tourism sector provides. Estimated that global crisis we have been suffering, this health crisis on the tourism industry is more than 5 times larger than the 2008 financial crisis. Tourism is the most vulnerable to natural and human-caused disasters. However, appearing any crisis, which might be a health crisis or a finance, is all considered to be, and the safety is very important in this sector. Restriction of people's, I mean to say, lockdown is a kind of restriction Okay, we have lockdown, pandemic period, and restriction movement within region countries have another industry and the consumptions of tourism. We know tourism is in an economically important sector, and we also know that tourism makes contributions to creation, export, revenue, and domestic value add. And we know well that tourism helps to the attractiveness and of destinations. Several studies have revealed that the preference and tourists after this have changed. The tendency usually, to say about the change experience, the tendency usually use of the internet tools and to the expertise of agents follow crisis. All in the are continually disrupted by noise and nations, and the tree industry is one of them. Not an okay. New trends and innovation are very important tourism sector, as they are all other campaigns with these tourism trends. Businesses to stay competitive, to cater to the customers, as well as making this sustainable. Next, with the 19, some needs have changed and new requirements have emerged. As three things you can say researchers, we need to take relevant to help recreate and address the challenges in the sector and ensure local business and community to benefit this growth. Be aware of what trends could emerge during a huge tourism crisis, COVID-19 pandemic that we have been from. As we can precautions to speed up recovery in the sector and reshape marketing of tourism in the future. Therefore, based on these, I mentioned about the research to reveal the views of Turkish European tourism academics regarding the emerging in the tourism sector in the pandemic period, and compare the gathers based on origin country tribal. In the study, Turkey was taken country, but those participants from European country was taken as one country, and other one where I tested in my research was being or not infected with T, and based on findings, there are recommendations provided in my research. A question-based was used in data collection. Data collection was by distributing the link of my questionnaire through a survey. Questionnaire is gathering information about individual characteristics, perceptions, attributes, and survey stages. This questionnaire, choosing a survey strategy, research survey strategy that I implement an online survey. Views of my participants from all countries gathered in the follows: hygiene, marketing strategy employed, international service delivery in tourism sector, voice-activated technology in service, virtual reality technologies, eco-travel, local values in the needs and introduce artificial intelligence service delivery, use of face recognition technology, smart systems, traveling out tourism. Academics from some chosen three faculties in tourism and 50 from some departments of tourism, some European, such as Finland, Greece, Australia, participated in my link was solely chosen talents by the researcher through LinkedIn, and they were all explained the purpose of the research. Frequency analysis, sample study, one sample and one way unknown performed collected data. On all these analyses, found that and European significantly differ that needs and conditions would central in the post-pandemic. To point out, Turkish academics had high items tested here. Also found academics do differ in the regard to emerging trends in the post-pandemic based on gender. Was found a factor, determinant factor in the research. As found t-test, means of treatments for all tested items on the set, but found not to be in will be more common in the post. And all that those who were infected with 19 were to have much more. Another finding is that those infected in have significantly different comment to see the service would consume through virtual research decision, as well as service robots, guides, would be more in the sector. This paper found that participants view the emerging sector in the post-pandemic based on tourism academy. Conclusion: tourism academy have higher experience period regarding that would be more mental access. Also note that the European academics with COVID-19 history have high regarding that to be more important following the. It is not worth it that who were infected in significantly different from academics in customers would demand to see the product before the decision, as the use of service robots and robot guides and facilities in the gender and are not determining the views of academics in tourism. Academics to have a still be more of traveling in the future. What about the space in the research? Academics views in trends post-pandemic period are important in activities in the. Therefore, focus should be given to the. For your call, any question, That's all for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davut Uysal, for your presentation. If you haven't got any question to our colleague, I can pass to the third attendee, whose name is Mr. Felix. Felix, I think you're there. Okay. Now it's your turn, Mr. Felix, and his colleague, Mr. Shem Wombu. Okay. You can start, Mr. Felix, if you're ready. Yes, Mr. Felix, are you having a problem about connection and giving your presentation?
I think they can't hear you.
We can hear you. Mr. Felix, I hear you.
Yes. Oh, okay, okay.
We are loading the presentation.
No, we can't see your presentation. Please share your presentation.
So that we share.
Here as well.
Okay, okay. Now it is
all right.
on.
It has come up?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Okay, we are going to do this presentation, the two of us.
Loading, it takes 2 minutes to load the...
Okay, we are going to do the presentation, the two of us, and I want to say that thank you for the invitation. And as you know, currently we have COVID-19, which is a major challenge. Our presentation is looking at the community resilience models for conservation of cultural ecosystem services and tourism management post-COVID-19 in park adjacent communities within Aberdares National Park, which is found in Kenya. We are the two of us. That is me, Dr. Felix Lamek Mingate, and we have Dr. Shem Wambugu Maingi. So what I want to say is that Dr. Wambugu is going to take us to the presentation, and then I will do the conclusions.
Thank you very much. And I will start the presentation by saying that the impact of COVID-19 on tourism-dependent communities has been highly significant all over the world, and particularly here within African context. The COVID-19 pandemic deepened socioeconomic inequalities of tourism-dependent communities, therefore increasingly advocating for a justice framework to support the local communities. It was also emerged that a socio-ecological and sustainable livelihood perspective or approach was therefore presented a viable framework for assessing particularly how local communities can be resilient to these shocks. Additionally, the Hanoi Statement in 2016 recognized the roles of local communities, integrating local communities as partners in tourism and conservation. However, historically, we've had the issue of exclusion of the indigenous people from conservation and tourism, and this is also an issue in the African context. So tourism in Kenya has been an important sector, has been a key sector with a significant impact to the economy, to the ecosystems, as well as local development. Currently, as per 2019, before the pandemic, Kenya witnessed a 1.19% increase in international arrivals, which accounted to 2.048 million visitors in 2019, 3.9% growth in revenues from 157 billion Kenya shillings in 2018 to 163 billion Kenya shillings in 2019. Tourism in Kenya has been a major source of foreign exchange earnings, attributing to about 8.2% of the total economy, supporting 1.57 million jobs directly and indirectly in 2019. However, tourism in Kenya has gone through unprecedented challenges owing to the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic continues to wreak havoc across the globe and also in Kenya. And local communities, especially in African context, have borne the brunt of really the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in our tourism sector, as well as its impact on the resource, the ecosystem services that they enjoy from this tourism sector. Also, local communities have had a connection with our ecosystems. We've seen that connection has been non-exploitive, symbiotic, aesthetic, and spiritual in nature. To a particular extent, communities have really benefited from nature. And when we see the impacts of COVID, we can see that COVID-19 has really had a very big impact globally. In 2020, we've seen a 70% decline in international tourism arrivals. The trends we've also seen a loss of 700 million international tourist arrivals, loss of $730 billion in tourism exports, as well as income loss 8 times the income loss of the 2009 economic crisis. And therefore, we've seen a very big impact globally. And there have been various scenarios from the UNWTO on the tourism recovery process. We've had a number of analyses to examine how tourism recovery would actually take place. And the key argument that we are giving in our paper is the issue of community resilience. We are talking about the issue of resilience as being a basis for sustainable tourism recovery. So we shall talk a bit about that when we talk about the models of tourism recovery. Now, what has been the impact of COVID-19 on tourism in Kenyan context? We see the impact has also been economic, social, and environmental. And in terms of economic impact, we've seen the first-tier impacts, a drop in tourism GDP. We've also seen losses of jobs and livelihoods that have affected local communities, poverty rise, collapse of the tourism value chain. In the second-tier impacts, in the short term, we've seen a collapse of the tourism supply chains, a debt problem in tourism, capital flights, disinvestment, the stall in economic activities. And in the third-tier impacts, in the long term, we are going to see economic recession, collapse of the economy, collapse of the tourism economy, a widening debt crisis, financial distress, economic shutdowns, currency crisis, stagflation, that is stagnation and inflation of the economy, as well as jobless recovery. So we are facing an economic crisis in a Kenyan context. We're also facing a social crisis. And when we talk about the social crisis as a trend, we are seeing in the first-tier impact, we see a disproportionate impact on vulnerable people. We are seeing the vulnerable employees being targeted job losses, loss of livelihoods, social isolation. We've seen the politicized responses, misinformation, social stigma, and short second-tier impacts. We've seen social deprivation, breakdown of social services, breakdown of social institutions, for example, families, lack of trust, depression, tension, mental health issues. And this has also led in the long-term social conflicts between communities and tourism, stakeholders. We've seen social inequalities in tourism, losses of lives and livelihoods, and we've seen an adverse impact in terms of social impacts. When we look at the ecological impacts, of COVID, we've seen an increase in biomedical waste. And here we are talking about the masks, the PVCs, the gloves, syringes, gowns, PPEs, and that is having an adverse effect on the environment. We've also seen increased human vulnerability to zoonotic pathogens, an increase in single-use plastics. We've seen the use of single-use plastics as face shields, PPE wastes. In the second-tier impacts, we've seen the use of polypropylene, which is used to make N95 masks. We've seen uncontrolled dumping of single-use plastics in some of our health centers. We've seen public health risks, open burning and controlled incineration that has led to pollution, ecological pollution, and national health crisis. In a more sustainable way, and that's why, according to Gaman and Patra, Gaman and Patra 2020 talked about an agile, demand-driven recovery as opposed to a natural recovery. And that agile, demand-driven recovery means that we have to address the issue of resilience, a recovery that is much more resilient. And that is actually indicated in this slide when we compare resilient versus sustainable system. A much more resilient system actually is able to absorb, recover, and adapt from the disturbance, and is much more sustainable compared to a much more sustainable and non-resilient system, anti-resilient system. So when you talk about an a resilient model, then we are talking about a resilient model from economic, environmental, and social disturbances. A resilient system that is able to allow communities to, continue building their livelihoods and increasing their functionalities and in turn enhancing sustainability. So, as far as sustainable tourism models are concerned and resilient models are concerned, there is need for a well-grounded approach for tourism recovery that integrates the needs of local communities to sustain the sector in the post-COVID era. We've had Constange 2020 talked about post-pandemic management and marketing that plays a very important role in the new normal. A form of post-pandemic tourism that is quite different from the previous trends in terms of tourism recovery. Also, Bingeli actually proposed that different countries come up with their own tourism recovery curves when it comes to and these tourism recovery curves should actually focus on resilient drivers in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, according to Liu, we need to widen the debate and talk about resilience rather than recovery thinking. A resilient thinking is a thinking in tourism that advocates for economic, ecological, and social system. And that's why we are talking about recovery and resilience as a basis of sustainable tourism development in the African context. And in such a resilient system, we need to focus on the capacity of our tourism system to adapt and respond to the crisis. And that was a major weakness in the Kenyan context when it came to COVID response and COVID adaptation. We had a problem in terms of resilience, and therefore we had an issue when it comes to recovery. So what do we mean by resilience? Resilience is the ability of a social system to respond and recover from disasters, and includes the inherent conditions that allow a system to absorb its impacts, cope with the event, as well as post-event, and the ability of a social system to adapt and to cope with the threat. And that means reorganization, change, innovation, and learning in response to that particular threat. So when you talk about resilience, we are talking about resilience as a process, a mediating process that helps us to get better than expected outcomes from adversities. So when you talk about community resilience, we've had a number of studies from the literature review that have examined how communities have survived from collective traumas, according to Norris et al. 2008. Sherrieb et al. 2010 actually talked about adaptive capacity models in building community resilience that were based on economic, social, information, communication, and community competence. Also, Sharma et al. 2021 also provided a framework that outlined factors or antecedents for building community resilience. And therefore, the debate has been there. However, the literature, a review of literature has indicated there's been limited research that links communities in conservation of cultural ecosystem services, that link communities' resilience in conservation of cultural ecosystem services and tourism in the post-COVID pandemic era. And that actually also outlines the fact that communities have been left out in the recovery and the resilience debates, and therefore in the African context, we need to really integrate the role of communities. So as a problem, park-adjacent communities continue to experience the effects of COVID-19. They require models that can help them to adjust and become more resilient in the post-COVID-19 pandemic era. Local communities have a strategic role in tourism, and therefore we have to engage local communities. And COVID-19 disruption, for instance, calls for a widespread innovation in the formulation of resilience models for ecological conservation, sustainable tourism, marketing, and management. So the objectives of this study, therefore, was to examine whether there were community resilience models that examine the interconnection between building resilience for communities, park-adjacent communities, and improved cultural ecosystem services, socioeconomic well-being, and tourism in the post-COVID-19 pandemic era. Further, the study sought to examine the local policy interventions for conservation of cultural ecosystem services and tourism resilience. So when you go to literature review, there have been various studies that have really looked at community resilience in different contexts. For example, Daly et al. Talked about resilience from both personal, individual level, community level, and institutional environment. And the key aspects, according to this study, was the ability for us a tourism system to have procedural and distributive justice that really identify both the human rights, the personal aspects, as well as the community rights and the environmental rights. Also, we had the issue of empowerment. Empowerment as an important variable in building community resilience, empowerment and trust, as well as community competence. And indeed, these variables, according to this study, are quite important when you talk about the debate of making communities much more resilient. According to Pattern 2010, Pattern 2010 came up with a community resilient model that added a very important aspect of building community resilience. One was self-efficacy, and it's very, very important for communities to have that cultural identity, self-efficacy that is able for them, they're able to identify themselves within that process of building resilience. Also, the aspect of critical awareness, the ability for them to understand what they're facing, outcome expectancies, action coping, responsibility, and planning. Also, the number of community factors which made the study quite significant in terms of contribution to knowledge. They talked about community participation, the need to enhance the sense of the community, place attachment, collective efficacy, and social responsibility. So we've had other studies that really have had a significant effect. For example, Calgaro et al., where they talked about resilience from identifying what are some of the factors that expose communities, increase the exposure to the various external shocks. And when we talk about the exposure factors, we are looking at the population characteristics, the population dynamics, the biophysical environment, the built environment. And also, apart from exposure, we're also talking about how sensitive, the sensitivity of the communities. And here we are talking about the tourism-specific sensitivities, identifying the market sensitivity, the service, the supply sensitivities, the destination positioning, the destination image sensitivity. Also, there are economic aspects of the sensitivity that where we have to examine the livelihood portfolios, the liquid and fixed assets, credit history and insurance, as well as human social dimensions, physical dimensions, and the governance processes. And for us to be able to examine both exposure and sensitivity, we can be able to come up with system adaptiveness. And here, when we talk about system adaptiveness, according to Calgaro's model, we look at the coping responses, adjustment, the adaptation responses, and these adaptation responses include both the policy interventions, the livelihood changes for the locals, as well as the network fortification. So indeed, there's been a growth of research on resilience modeling and resilience building. And as we move ahead, we are able to get more new knowledge on how we can build more resilient from COVID-19 in the tourism sector. Also, we had models, for example, in the psychology perspective from the social psychology era. And for example, Ellis and Dietz 2017 talked about building community resilience as a process of, as a continuous process of assessment and creating that state of readiness, creating a shared understanding within local communities and enhanced engaged communities. And we can see from an interdisciplinary perspective, we can be able to identify some of the key variables that can be useful towards building community resilience. So from our research, we did
sorry for interrupting, Mr. Felix. Sorry for interrupting. As we will have our next sessions at 2:45, is it possible to be a bit quicker and come to an end, please? Sorry.
Yes. So our study was conducted in the Aberdares. Aberdares is one of our major conservation areas. It's a World Heritage Site. And this study was conducted on tourism adjacent communities within the Abades area. And let me go direct to the findings. So our key findings from a policy perspective, the Kenya government came up with a tourism policy framework in 2020 that actually focused on the element of building tourism resilience. And the key factors that the government was focusing on was inclusive tourism products and services, the issue of standards pricing, research, information management, technology and innovation, tourism development and promotion and marketing. Though we can also note the issue of cross and intersectoral linkages, as well as legal and institutional frameworks. But we can also note that there has been no national policy framework that links COVID-19 and wildlife conservation, community livelihoods, and ecosystem management and tourism. So those are some of the key issues that we've identified. And also, we also propose some of the models that can help us. As we said, our research title was more on community resilience models, and we have proposed a model that can help in addressing some of the negative issues we've experienced from our findings, and both economic models, social models, as well as ecological modeling that can help us to really build back better, and that is the key word. I will not go to the details because of time, but what I can say is that there needs to be policies that can help us to build back better. So in terms of economic development, we need to explore the sustainable livelihood resources for communities, sustainable livelihood assets, apart from just natural resources. Also in terms of social capital, there has been models, for example, Modern and Clift, that talked about the importance of adaptive cycles that really look at the patterns of change in ecosystems and ecosocial systems. And that adopts Antonov Sky's salutogenic approach to health. And that's one of the models that has really helped us in identifying a resilience approach from a social perspective. Also, we've had, from an information and communication perspective, we felt it was important that we build on Gibson and Taran 2010 in terms of their herringbone resilience model in terms of information and communication strategies. We need more leadership, more value-based information. We need to build more trust. We need to build more stress coping information strategies that can help us to really address the impacts of COVID in the communities. So from a community perspective, what we are saying that there are community antecedents from Mancini and Bowen, 2009. There are some community antecedents that are very important. The network structures, the community conditions and characteristics are very, very important that help communities cope with the COVID-19. Also, communities, we need to build their capacity. We need to have capacity building models that help in creating competence and also building their social capital that in turn helps them to build more resilience from such a pandemic. So in conclusion, my colleague can say.
Because of time, I want to say that currently there is no national policy framework that links COVID-19 with wildlife conservation, community livelihoods, and ecosystem management and tourism in Kenya. And that is why we need to have these models. One of the reasons why we wanted to study the models, we wanted to see how they can be used in Kenyan scenarios. And you can also see that resilience requires multiple frameworks that can examine community competence, that can look at the procedural and distributive justice, that can empower and also can create trust to the communities, and that can also allow community to participate during pandemics like COVID-19. We also need to have actions that can assist communities to cope, and we also need to have models that can, change livelihoods of communities, that can create also policy interventions, and also models that can help communities to actually fortify networks. All these are models that you need to start thinking about as you go along, and see how those kind of models can be built to help communities to cope or to be more resilient during this time of COVID-19. I think we can stop there because of time.
We want to acknowledge Kenyatta University, the British Institute of East Africa, for funding our research. This is part of a wider study that is ongoing. IUCN World Conservation for Protected Areas, TAPAS Network. We also want to acknowledge Aberdare's conservation area communities for participating in this study. And thank you very much. We recently published a book on tourism destination management in a post-pandemic context, and indeed, there is a lot of information that we need to process as we move on. Thank you very much, and we really appreciate these are some of our references, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation, for your valuable support, Mr. Felix and Wambugu, Mr. Wambugu. Thank you. And also, I congratulate you with your for your new book. My dear friends, as I know, we had two more attendees in this session, but they aren't here. So if you haven't got any problem, because the time given to us has finished, if you haven't any question, I'll have to finish the session, my dear friends. Do you have any question to the attendees, and also any words to say? Mr. Felix, no, you have Mr. Daud and Yusuf. If you don't have...
I just want to say thank you very much for inviting us for this conference, and we want you to continue inviting us more so that we can continue exchanging knowledge.
I thank you to you all, my friends. Thank you for your support to our Congress. Okay, I'm ending the session. Right. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Take care.